Psychology of adopted child. So, in this video, I'll talk about the genetic roots of the problems that are associated with adoption. I'll talk about the us versus mentality and how it relates to adoption. It's basically at the root of adoption problems. And finally, I'll talk about a host of psychological and behavioral problems that are seen in adopted children. So, let's talk about the genetic roots of adoption problems. So basically, humans are wired to seek connection and love and support from their close genetic relatives. So that means, like, obviously, like, ultimately, humans are driven by selfishness and self preservation. But after self preservation, because if they preserve themselves, they help their genes survive and reproduce. That is the ultimate benefit that humans can get. But after that, humans are wired to help their genetic kin. The closer the genetic relatives to them, the more genes they share with them. So that means by helping close genetic kin, they're helping their own genes. So this is why people are more likely to help their parent or sibling with whom they share 50% of their genes compared to their cousins or distant cousins. So this is a well-known theory in evolutionary psychology, and it's called kin selection or inclusive fitness theory, that we tend to increase our fitness by helping our close genetic relatives. So in a parent-child dynamic, the same thing applies like kin selection theory. Parents are motivated to help their children because they're genetically related to them, and children are sort of wired to seek that uh, love, support, and care from their biological parents because they share the same genes. They share 50% of the genes with them. So and on top of that, human babies, like when they're born, they're helpless. So they have this very strong drive to attain unconditional love, support, and care from their biological parents. So adoption presents a disruption in this pattern. I don't know how common adoption is in the animal kingdom. I've seen examples of it here and there on social media and some videos, but I haven't read upon it. But we all know that in humans, adoption is very common. Like, it's very common. Humans tend to adopt genetically unrelated children at different age levels. Like some adopt infants, and some adopt adolescents, and some even adopt teenagers, even though that's less common because through adoption, these adoptive parents, a lot of them, they're not able to have their own kids, so they want to raise children. So mostly children of it's likely that the adoptive parents, they usually adopt children who are younger in age. So let's talk about this interesting us versus them mentality. It's at the root of so many human problems and like societal issues. So because humans are wired to favor their genetic relatives, that automatically means, see, if you're favoring someone, you have to disfavor someone. So if you're favoring your genetic relatives, who are you disfavoring? Who are you not favoring? You're not favoring people who are not genetically related to you. People, like, mostly in ancestral times, the people who fell under this them category were neighboring tribes who were not genetically related to you. Obviously, if you've read history, you know that, like, and the entire history of humanity is all about like neighboring tribes raiding neighboring tribes, conquering lands, and all of that. So there is so those neighboring tribes, like, they fall into the them category, and it's very easy to conceptualize that, because a group of humans, because humans are mammals and social mammals, they tend to survive and enhance their chances of survival and reproduction if they live in groups. So a group of humans is was has always been under threat from other groups of humans, because there has been competition for land and other resources. So in if you think about the us versus them mentality, this is easy to understand. But what most people uh, don't grasp is that this us versus them mentality also manifests in our everyday lives. It also manifests within a human group. It also manifests in families, in schools, in offices. So because the adopted child is not genetically related to the adoptive parent, the child sort of sees the adoptive parent as them. Uh, and this phenomenon is worse in interracial adoption. So when parents, when they adopt a child from a different race, or child who looks very dissimilar to how they look, because obviously the child is not like my I hate my adoptive parents because they're not genetically related to me. No, we pay attention to the cues of genetic similarity, to the physical cues of genetic similarity. And that mostly means like how people look. If someone doesn't look like us, they're probably not genetically related to us, and they automatically fall into the them category. Like this is at the root of racism even. So that same us versus them mentality is seen in adopted children and adopted parents, like in their dynamic, which leads to a host of psychological and behavioral problems. So first of all, because the child is not um, biologically related to the adoptive parent, the child sort of fails to attach to the adoptive parent. Obviously, how the adoptive parent behaves also is a big factor in this. But even not even the fact that the child is not biologically related, because the child sees that the parent, like, maybe is too dissimilar to how the child, because the child expects its primary caregivers, its biological parents, to be similar uh, to himself or herself. When that doesn't happen, the child is unable to attach, or slow to attach to the adoptive parents. Like research has shown that like the children who are adopted, the infants who are adopted, they tend to attach more slowly to their adoptive parents. And in particular, research has shown that they tend to have disorganized attachment. So disorganized attachment is between anxious attachment and avoidant attachment. Like it's partly anxious and partly avoidant, also called fearful avoidant attachment. It's a very chaotic attachment style. uh, uh, and can be and can lead to a lot of emotional instability and volatility in adopted children. The next point is antisocial behavior, because the child has this anger or aggression, the anger for like sort of being rejected by the biological parents, and the feeling like they have been like sort of abandoned, and the feeling that they sort of they have this negative develop this negative perception of people in general, which can leak out in antisocial behaviors. And this point is important: identity crisis. Um, for children to develop a healthy sense of identity, they need to feel that they belong in their families, and they're getting the love and support from their primary caregivers. uh, they basically like seek unconditional love and support from their primary caregivers. Because adopted children, they 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 feel out of place in their adoptive families because of the us versus them mentality. They feel like they don't know who they are, they question their place in the world, and that leads to an identity crisis. They're not able to, they're constantly trying to figure out who they are, who they're like, they have this drive to understand who they really are, who their biological parents were, and why they left them. They have all these questions. They tend to be curious also. They tend to be curious because of this, because they don't know who they are. It takes a really long time for them to develop a stable sense of identity. The next point is emotional dysregulation. It's a consequence of like this failing to attach or slow attachment. So a big part of parenting is regulating the emotions of the child. So when the child is crying, you go and soothe the child and stuff like that. Because because the adopted child fails to attach or attaches slowly, it fails to sort of learn how to regulate its own emotions. So this can cause problems further down the road, because the child may not be able to control his or her emotions in different contexts and situations. The next point is academic underachievement. Um, there have been multiple studies that have shown that adopted children tend to perform poorly in school, and again, this may be the consequence of not bonding with the adoptive parent, because when that bond occurs naturally between a parent and their biological child, the child learns how to not only regulate emotions, but there's also cognitive development that happens in children. So this cognitive impairment that is seen in adoptive children, and mainly it's been observed that they have language problems. There are problems in language. Obviously, when you are bonding to your parent, that bond is reflected in the words you use, in the communication that you have. So the more a child feels bonded to a parent, the more they will talk about their feelings, they'll share like their inner world with them. So the, there will be more language use compared to in a situation where the child is adopted. Again, this point, threatening adoptive family members, it again comes from the us versus them mentality. It's the same mentality which makes people threaten their like neighbors, neighboring tribes, neighboring countries, people of different races, because them is seen as a threat. Us is cooperation, them is a threat. So adopted children, if they don't, because adoption in itself is traumatic. I remember when I was in school, when I was a kid, I don't like even remember what age it was. I think around 7 or 8 years old. We used to tease each other or classmates. We used to call them we adopted. We used to say that you're adopted, and it pissed off nearly like everyone got pissed off when they were told they were adopted. And obviously, we were teasing each other, but we sort of knew instinctively that being adopted is not a good thing. Like you have been rejected by your biological parents. It's not a good thing. The idea in itself is traumatic. I won't say the idea, but adoption, that knowing that you're adopted. Like if adoptive parents do not reveal to their adopted child that they were adopted, they may like function like properly and without any problems for a very very long time. But once they come to know that they have been adopted, that can be traumatic, and that can lead to identity crisis. If you've seen that movie Into the Wild, it's a very good example of this phenomenon. In that movie, there was this guy. I think he was very smart and intelligent, and he used to do very well in college. I think he was in college in that movie. But but he used to question everything. Like I told you before, that adopted children, because they don't know who they are, they don't know their place in the world, they tend to question themselves and their world. So this guy in the movie, he used to question everything, and he used to think this education system is like meaningless. It's all meaningless. And then his parents told him that he was adopted. When he heard that, his sort of whole identity fell away, because he thought that everything that he had experienced till now was fake. So he wanted to re-experience his past and sort of re-establish his identity. So he leaves everything and he goes into the wild and sort of relives his childhood, adolescence, and all of that stuff. So that movie is a good example of how this identity crisis manifests in adopted children. The next point is resentment towards the biological parents for abandoning them, mainly for rejecting them, because the child is wired to seek unconditional love and support from its biological parents. So if they are putting Me for adoption, it means I am not worthy, it means I am not lovable unconditionally, it means I don't deserve support. So all of that breeds resentment in the adopted child towards the biological parents. And then, even if the adoptive parents are very good towards the adopted child, they provide everything, they love them and support them unconditionally, because the adopted child cannot feel the same love that he or she may have felt towards the biological parents if they were present in his or her life. They feel guilty towards the adoptive parents because they cannot reciprocate in the same way the adoptive parents are showing their love. Because adoptive parents, because they know this child is adopted, they might sort of shower extra love, care and attention on the adopted child. But because the adopted child does not feel the same way, uh, they're not able to reciprocate, which can lead to feelings of guilt towards the adoptive parent parents. The good news is that majority of adopted children do thrive in stable family environments, which means if the family is able to provide good nurturing support and care, adopted children can thrive in those families. But the major thing in that is that the major factor that leads to that is how emotionally stable the adoptive parents are, how well they are able to handle the adopted child's insecurities or fears of not belonging, how what role they play in making sure that the adopted child develops a stable sense of identity and self-esteem. That's it for the video. Thanks for watching.